Hello everyone and welcome to the Marketing Cloud API series. In a previous video, you have seen how to invoke SOAP API calls using AMP script from a landing page. In this video, we will see how to invoke the same data extension creation use case using SSJS from a landing page. Now, if you haven't watched the SOAP API calls from AMP script video yet, please do watch that first, as some of the basics about the SOAP envelope and how to convert them to the built-in API functions are covered in that video. And I'll be using some of that as a base for this session. Okay. Now I've divided this into two videos. The first part, we will look at the platform libraries API functions in SSJS that we can use. And the second part, we will look at how to use WS proxy option, which is a recommended approach from Salesforce. Okay. Now for the platform API function in SSJS, they're very similar to the ones that we have in AMP script. Like mainly you can see the create object, set object property, add object array item, and the invoke set that we have here. So depending upon the operation we need, we can actually specify which invoke operation we can use. For our case, we will be using the invoke create operation for creating the data extension. Now I've already explained what each of these functions do in the AMP script video, so I won't go through those again here. They function similar to how it is in AMP script. The same way we will be able to execute that in SSJS as well. So all you need to know is how the syntax differs from AMP script when you are using it in SSJS. So if you go to the Salesforce documentation under the SSJS platform functions, we can see all these functions listed with the syntax and examples. Now we have to use the platform.function prefix for each of these functions. For instance, like for the create object, you have to use platform.function.create object, and then you can specify the object that you want to create. Okay. Similarly, we have functions for set object property, as you can see here, and then add object array item. Okay, and we will be using the invoke create option for creating the data extension. Now this is one that's slightly different from the one that we had seen in AMP script. Here we have to specify the status and the request ID as an array with two of these as the parameters. So we will get back the status as the first and the request ID as the second parameter once the function executes. Okay, and then you'll also see there's something called as options here. So that is an optional field. You can either specify it as a null, but if you want to specify additional options during creation, you can specify that here. Now you might wonder what is that values that we can actually provide for that options, right? So when you get parameters like this, how do you identify where can I go and see these things, right? So this is a create operation. So what you need to do is you need to go find out, okay, where is the create method in the SOAP API, right? So under the SOAP methods, you will see there's a create method here. So you can see here there is an options, okay, and it's of the data type create options, right? So that actually means create options is an object type. Okay, so if you go and search under the objects, you will see there is one called create options, and these are the various properties that it supports. Okay, so basically these are the values that you can actually pass in that option string. Okay, so for instance, if you wanted to specify that when you are saving, you want upsert to be considered for certain objects like send, list, and subscriber objects, then you have to specify that in the save options parameter here. Okay, so using this options parameter, within that, if I configure that saying save options, and if I specify that okay, I want it to be upserted for certain objects, I can use that. Similarly, there are other configurations also that we can use, but for our use case, we are not going to use any of those complex filters. For now, we will just keep that as null. And we will just do a simple data extension creation example. Okay, so for our example, we are going to create the data extension here, and it's going to be called API series DE2. So as you can see right now in my contact builder under the API series folder, I don't have the data extension. Okay, so once we run the SSJS code, we will come back here and verify if that new DE gets created. So let's go to our code here. So we are going to use our similar setup that we have seen in the previous videos. We have this file that we have actually connected through our Dropbox. We will go ahead and paste our code here and then try to execute that in the cloud page or the landing page. Okay, so what I've done here is I already have the code ready. So I'll go ahead and paste it here, and then I'll explain to you guys what I've done. So if you remember from the previous AMP script video, you have seen how we have mapped the SOAP envelope into each of those AMP script functions, right? So what I've done is I've actually copy pasted here all the AMP script functions that we had created in the AMP script video where we used for the creation of the data extension, right? So all the ones that you see commented here in the green, they're all the AMP script functions. So I've commented it out, and then what we are going to do is we are going to write the corresponding SSJS functions using the API functions that we just saw in the documentation, right? So you can see that there's a one-to-one mapping, for when you have this AMP script function with the create object, you have a corresponding one here for platform.function.create object, and the object is the same. Okay, so it's very easy for us to replicate that, once if you already have an AMP script code, or if you know how to convert that into AMP script, if you want to do it into SSJS, it's very easy. So you just use the corresponding function on the SSJS side that relates to the AMP script function. Okay, so here we have actually declared we went ahead and then we actually created this object here for the data extension. That's the root object. Then we created a sub node for the client ID where we specified the MID. Okay, and then this is some of the root properties under that particular data extension object. Then we had because this is a sendable data extension, we had to specify the subscriber property here. So this is a sendable data extension field. We added that, and then we also added the sendable subscriber field. Okay, so we added those two. And as you can see here, when we came into the fields part, we have this add object array item as well, very similar to how we had it in AMP script as well, right? So you can see this like for like, wherever you had the set object property, I'm using the platform.function.set object property. The parameters are exactly the same. Only thing is you don't use the ampersand, the @ sign here, because that is for AMP script. Here you just use the variable that you have in SSJS, followed by the values, then the name, the key and the values that you need to pass for each of those. Okay, so once we have set up all these fields that we have, we're pretty much good to go. And then the final one is to do the invoke create, right? So in AMP script we saw that it was just a direct invoke create. We specify the object that we want to create, which we have listed everything here. And then finally we have two variables where we said give us the status and the error finally when this particular create is invoked, right? But then in here for the SSJS side, we saw that you have to use that array here for the status and the request ID. The first parameter will be the status ID, and the second one will be the request ID. Okay, so we will go ahead and then we will pass in the invoke create. The first one will be the object that we have actually created at the root, that is DE. And we'll pass this array here. So in that we will get back the status code, and then we'll also get the request ID here. And then the third parameter is the options that we saw earlier in the documentation, right? And we don't want to specify any configuration, so we will leave it as null. Okay, and then with that we will go ahead and output the status and the request ID. Okay, so the name of this data extension that we have given, just to confirm here, it's API series DE2. The customer key is test API DE2. Sorry, so I'll go ahead and then execute this, and let's see how it works. Okay, so this is our landing page where we will go ahead and execute it. Let me refresh. Okay, you can see that the status is data extension is created, and the request ID is comes back as 0, which means it's okay. So let's go to our contact builder. I will do a refresh and come back to this one, and then you can see here the API series DE2 with the test API DE2 has been created. If we go in, we should be able to see all the fields that we had specified. Even the data retention, whatever we had specified, is also provided here. So there is a 1 month that is a retention period that we had actually specified in the properties. So everything whatever we specified has been correctly created. So you can see we have pretty much very similar functions to the AMP script API functions here in SSJS as well, and we get exactly the same output with the data extension being created, right? Now Salesforce recommends a more performant approach to interact with SOAP API calls and the different SOAP objects and methods, right? And that is using the WS proxy script object, which is something we will see in our next video. I hope this video is very useful. Thank you for watching.